Good evening. Thank you for joining us for the Burlington Police Commission meeting. The date is May 28th and the time is 6:03. 5 commissioners are present and we have a quorum. Also present is Chief Murad. Item 1.3 is changes or modifications to the agenda. I have a motion to modify the agenda to cancel the executive session and include as part of the commission business a discussion of Chief Murad's memo to officers to come up to a, quote, full stop at North End Park and North Champlain, unquote. Is there a motion to second the modified agenda?
I second it.
Commissioner Cox, do you want to turn on your,
I second the modified agenda, but I would just point out, I believe that there's 4 people.
Oh, did I say 5? I'm sorry, I stand corrected. There are 4 people, but we still have quorum. Any discussions? Hearing none, all in favor of the approval of the modified agenda, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. The agenda has been accepted as changed. Item 2.1 is approval of minutes from the regular commission meeting of April 2024. I have one change, Tim. Roll call and determination of quorum. 5 commissioners were present, constituting a quorum. Could you include the names of all the commissioners moving forward? Thank you. Any other changes? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the minutes with one change?
So move.
Is there a second? Commissioner Garrison, all in favor of the approval of the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Item 3.1 is public forum. I'm sorry, Commissioner.
I was not in attendance in April. So
Okay. Yes. I think we will. Tim will make a note of it. So
I also wasn't in attendance
correct.
either.
Correct. So I'm actually keeping track of the attendance for the purposes of receiving our monthly stipend, which is sort of like kind of fallen off the grid. So that's why I'm keeping track of it. One of the many reasons I'm keeping track of it. But okay, we have public forum. I don't know, Tim, if anybody's online. Is there anybody in person who wants to address the commission? Anybody who is here to address the commission in person? No, and there's nobody online. Okay, perfect. That closes our public forum. Item 4.1 and 4.2, Chief's report and continued discussion of DD 40. So go ahead, Chief. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much. Before I begin the Chief's report, which I regret was only uploaded this morning and sent over this morning, apologies, but we were trying to squeeze in photographs, etc., from the marathon, which was this weekend. But before I begin the report, I wanted to make note of the fact that Saturday was May 25th, and that is 4 years from the murder in Minneapolis of George Floyd. Reuters published an article with the headline, 4 years after George Floyd killing, police reform slow to follow. And I mean no disrespect to the folks at Reuters, but I don't think that's the case in Burlington. The slow to follow. We have initiated and enacted multiple reforms and enhanced existing policies, and it's not a static effort. We've constantly been seeking to improve, as the new discipline directive that we'll continue to discuss tonight shows. And as that directive review also shows, many of these efforts have involved you, the independent Burlington Police Commission. Within weeks of that horrible crime, we had created a brand new use of force policy, which I will discuss a little bit more in detail shortly. We had arranged so that every single citizen complaint came to the Burlington Police Commission at the same time as the police department, and so that there was an opportunity for regular updates on the review process and input into any corrective actions. We created an entire division of the department since that terrible date dedicated to social services and alternatives to police response, specifically the Crisis Advocacy Intervention Programs, or CAPE, and this includes our community support liaisons, in-house social workers who help address substance use disorder, houselessness, chronic mental health. It also includes the new Burlington Cares team, which we've hired a clinical supervisor for and at work hiring clinicians for to help provide a response to crises that need not automatically require an armed officer. We undertook 2 rounds of intensive, iterative, anti-bias and cultural competency training for every officer in the department, every employee in the department. The first in 2021 with Trustee Loving, and the second in 2023, which was a facilitated lesson about the 14th Amendment that was led by the nationally recognized Center for Policing Equity. We review every single use of force via a multi-part, multi-officer review process that includes trained supervisors and the Deputy Chief of Operations and his monthly report on those. We have strong policies. As I said before, within weeks of this crime, we had written a progressive and forward-thinking use of force policy, the most progressive and forward-thinking in the state. And that was done with the great help of the Committee to Review Policing Practices, which took place in 2019 and early 2020 and was led by a former member of the Burlington Police Commission and was also had members of the Burlington Police Commission. The discussion about the directive before we adopted it in July of 2020 was with the Burlington Police Commission. It was a stronger document, this use of force policy. It had requirements for duty to intervene, duty to care, duty to report, and it was sufficiently effective and progressive that it was ultimately largely used as the template for the statewide use of force policy, which was adopted in October 2021. We make every use of force public on a monthly basis. Deputy Chief Lebrecht publishes and provides a synopsis of them, including the description of the force and the demographics. No other agency in Vermont does this. I don't know of many agencies in the country that do it. We release body-worn camera footage for about 25% of total incidences, owing to the fact that, again, an agreement that we made with you, the Independent Burlington Police Commission. No other agency in Vermont does this. We have changed our use of force training using de-escalation and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Every officer is trained in ICAT, which is the Police Executive Research Forum's Integrating Communications, Assessment, and Tactics. And I just... In looking at that sort of recap of this terrible event nationally and all of the things that came from it, the implication that things had been slow, I take issue with that insofar as our community goes. So, yeah.
Should we wait till the end to ask?
No, if you have questions about any of that, please go right ahead.
So it's not so much of a question as just maybe an addition. I did notice that you mentioned but after the George Floyd incident, a lot of people talked about trying to recruit more officers that had higher educations and more life experience, either through the educational process or through previous jobs, so that they're not coming to the police departments very green.
Yeah.
And I think that what I've seen this year is that in spades, and I love it. I love just like the large number of people that have degrees and advanced degrees in both your staff and the sworn officers, people with life experience. I know, like, one that I always think about is a street outreach person who became then a police officer.
Yeah.
And just what a wealth of experience that person brings to the job,
Yeah.
having been street outreach first. And I think that that's something that you should add to your list, is just the changing of the personnel in the police department and the staff can bring to life all of the other directives and procedures and policies and stuff. You need real people that can implement these things. And I think with the higher educational, so your averages go up, right? So it's not that everybody necessarily has to have higher degrees, but just that on average, the educational attainment goes up and prior life experience goes up.
Thanks so much for saying that. Yeah, we actually have two officers now. The very first officer that we hired after the pause in our hiring that was required by the reduction of the authorized staffing cap, the very first officer we hired, yes, you're correct, had been a street outreach team member and came over to the police department. We had another street outreach team member who went over first to be a CSL and then transitioned from being a CSL into being a police officer recently. And, you know, I think that both of those things say a lot about the men and women, not only who those two individuals are, but the men and women with whom they work, right? These are two people who had already shown a social worker kind of bent. It was that they understood that their role is somebody who has to do that kind of work and that kind of outreach to the community, and yet both of them also felt comfortable transitioning into being a police officer. That you know, I think the presumed dichotomy that exists between those things is not nearly as pronounced as people think, at least not inside the BPD. So thank you for pointing that out. So on to the chief's report. If you thank you. We did our 2023 awards earlier this month. The Queen City Police Foundation hosted, along with the Marriott, and the mayor is there speaking. We gave out a number of different awards. We recognized our emergency response unit and crisis response and negotiation unit. We recognized a community partner, Asa Lauren, who has been very involved in recovering stolen property in town. We gave our Chiefs Award to Detective Eric Cradaville. We gave our Medal of Honor to retired Sergeant Simon Bombard. That's not an award that we give out very frequently. We gave something to the team that investigated and closed the terrible shooting involving the 3 young Palestinian men, including the ATF agent who made that apprehension of our shooter. We gave an award to the drug unit. We had our wonderful chair of the Burlington Police Commission, Chair Rao, came and gave an award to Executive Manager Shannon Trammell. And so the big group you see there, that is the negotiation and emergency response teams. That's Asa Lauren up in the upper corner. Next, please. There's Simon Bombard in the Medal of Honor. There is the chair and an executive manager, Trammell. And then there's Detective Cradaville getting his Chiefs Award. We gave awards to Carolyn Irwin and Anhad Bajwa for the amazing job that they did on recruitment in 2023, apologies. An award to one of our community support liaisons, Bridget Blazik, for some amazing work that she did, not only overall, but specifically with an undocumented immigrant woman who she was remarkably helpful for. And then the police commission itself gave awards to Dave Hartnett, a community fixture, somebody who is very important to Burlington, and that was an award from the Queen City Police Foundation. And the Queen City Police Foundation also gave an award to Jay Fayette there in the other corner. Next, please. We had a meeting with some marketplace partners around issues that are happening on the marketplace. We're all struggling to deal with the uptick that we've seen in retail theft and in other forms of disorder, but our marketplace partners are incredibly important, and this was a great opportunity to get together with members of the public. One of our officers, Kevin Wilson, took one of our department motorcycles and participated in something called the Police Unity Tour, which is a long bicycle ride from New Jersey to Washington, D.C. And there he is. The motorcycles escort the bicycles and make sure the bikes are safe on that long trip. This was the month of Police Memorial Week. That's an annual event. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Police Memorial Week was proclaimed in 1962. Officers attend. That's a huge candlelight vigil. That's not one of our photographs. I took that from, I believe, either Perf or maybe it was from Bill Bratton's police Twitter page, but that view of the stage and all those candles. But those 3 folks there are officers of ours, and they went down on their own time and participated. It's a really moving experience. And then the gravestones that were in the center are 2 of we've had 3 line of duty deaths in the Burlington Police Department's history, and those are 2 of their headstones. One is in South Burlington and one is in Burlington. The marathon. It was just this past Sunday. It was a very long day for all of us, but We didn't have to run 26.2 miles, so there's that. It was a really wonderful event. We love this event. I do. I just think that it's one of those days where the folks who come into town are there to enjoy themselves. They're there for this amazing experience and this thing that they've worked so hard for, or that someone they love has worked so hard for. And we're really thrilled to be able to take part in it. We don't have as many people as we used to. A component of why the route is now a double loop rather than a single loop is the fact that there are fewer officers to be able to control all the streets and the intersections that would be necessary if it were a single loop. But we still take part. We've got our folks on bikes there. One of those bikes is the one that was down in Washington, but it was back in time to be able to lead this terrific event. And next page, please. We've got some scenes here. Corporal Irwin and Rich Weinish, Lieutenant Rich Weinish, were the ones who really put it together. Corporal Irwin has done this for decades now. She's an old hat. She's got not decades plural, excuse me, but more than a decade. And she's got a tremendous relationship with the staff at Run Vermont. This was Rich's first year running it, and it went as smoothly as one could hope. It really is a terrific day for all of us. Sworn head count, we are currently at 65 as of May 1st. Not the direction that we want to be going in, but I'm hopeful that we're actually going to be able to see that go up in June. It won't be reflected on June 1st, and these head count pictures are always on the 1st, but we anticipate bringing somebody aboard on June 3rd, having a new officer, a new lateral police officer start on June 3rd. This coming Friday, our police recruit graduates from the police academy, and so she is already accounted for in this. She's an employee already, of course, but will be out of the academy. And we also anticipate another lateral joining us, technically a lateral, but actually an officer who had gone through the police academy, gone to field training, needed some extra work, has been a CSO for the last year, and is going to be rejoining us as a police officer again, and we're really excited about that. So that'll be, some new officers coming in aboard. They won't be solo officers for some time, but we are trying to move in the right direction. Next, please. So that difference, by the way, the idea about coming out of the academy, for example, but not being a solo officer, or being a lateral officer who's arrived and has been an officer for 20 years, but has to go through a process here in Vermont before he can become a solo officer, is what we mean when we talk about actual versus effective. We also, of course, have other officers who I have one officer who is about to have twins. I have another officer who is, out on long-term military leave. And so they are not counted. We are paying them. They are on our head count and our payroll. And so they're in that orange line, but they're not in that blue line. The blue line has been farther away from the orange line than we're used to seeing it. Normally those two things move in closer tandem. But the stresses of the past couple years have meant that they are spread apart. We've had more officers out on injury or other kinds of leave than we normally do or did. And so we are trying to bring those two closer together. And you'll see that we've had a little bit of success in that. We're not where we want to be with total head count, but with regard to effective head count, we're higher than we've been since December 2021. So there has been improvement on that front. And, we need more. There is no doubt about it, we need more. But right now, we actually have more folks, as the next slide will show, available for patrol than we have in a while. That number had gotten down to 22 at various points. It's at 26 right now. And so, that's a positive. But it's tenuous, and it is a much more precarious position than we want to be in at this stage. Next, please. We are still working, yes, Commissioner.
So I believe it was the last meeting, one of the community speakers were speaking to this issue of creamies with a cop.
Yes.
And I thought about this all month, and I thought, we really do need more of that.
Yeah.
And it was so nice in the picture just before this, in the slide just before this,
Yeah.
you showed a picture of a creamy stand.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you had given any thought to
We have.
implementing.
We have both Executive Manager Trammell and our community, our Public Information Officer and Community Engagement Coordinator, Sarah Tim, are at work on that and figuring out how we could do it, where we could do it. And I am a huge fan of creamies. And probably too big a fan as my, as some of my uniform buttons will attest. But I would love to get that back and to have us able to do that.
So Commissioner Cox, were you thinking in terms of like recruitment as well? Kind of, is that what you were thinking? Just kind of juxtapositioning those two?
I think about it a lot in terms of community outreach and
Yeah.
just, I like this whole idea of community policing, right? Where the police get to know people in the actual community, the people that live here. And so I think that, if you had some program where people could sign up or, get together with policemen and then you find out they're just people too.
Yeah.
Then that increases that level of trust and engagement where people don't feel like calling the police is calling some foreign entity. It's someone that I can trust, someone that I know.
Yes, that is a wonderful thing, and I'm hopeful for the rekindling of this project as well, and to try to get some of that out of it. So we are still working, of course, on our other roles. We've got currently 7 CSOs and 5 CSLs. That's as of today. That's because one of our CSLs was recently promoted to CSS, or Community Support Supervisor. And so that's really terrific for Anna Wagling, but it means that there's a slight hole in our program again. We've had very good success with that role, however, and I'm pretty confident that very early in the next fiscal year, we will once again have a full complement of 6 CSLs. Our 7 CSOs, that is about as high as we've gotten. I think we might have had 8 for a very brief period. We have one who is, I believe, in background, but we're also possibly going to lose one, as I said, to becoming a police officer sometime in June. So that number may drop from 7 to 6. Yes.
So I was wondering, I know like organizations like the Howard Center, for example, have trouble keeping their trained and experienced caseworkers because of the high cost of living in Burlington area, and then people just don't want to commute that far, especially when you're not getting paid that much. And I was wondering if your CSLs and CSOs experience those same sort of dysfunction in terms of what they get paid versus what the cost of living is in this area.
Well, I don't think there's anyone who feels that he or she is getting paid exactly what he or she wants. I think everybody probably would like a little bit more. Our compensation is, to my knowledge, better than a lot of our regional competitors, and that is true of all of the sectors. So our police officers are paid better than most of our regional competitors. They do more work, too. They do a lot more work. Our CSLs are better compensated than a lot of folks who are in similar social work roles. And then our CSOs, that is a good, healthy job as well. Can you purchase a house in Burlington, Vermont? I don't know the answer to that, and my gut tells me probably not when you're starting out. This town has gotten very expensive. And when we are looking at $2,500 a month in rent in some places, when we are looking at starting home prices of $250,000 to $500,000, I don't know how people make those things happen. And I am grateful that I'm as old as I am, and that it wasn't that hard, and yet it was hard when I started too. When my wife and I first bought an apartment in the Bronx. So I don't know the answer as far as is this a hard place to stay. I know that it is a challenging job. It's a challenging job, but it's a rewarding job, right? We have a lot of opportunity for you to feel like you made a difference during a day. But it's tough work too. We've had a lot of people who have been Howard employees in various ways become members of our team. So I'm hopeful that that's indicative of the fact that irrespective of compensation, there's also something of camaraderie in a place that people want to work. And we've seen a lot of internal movement meaning that people don't want to leave the agency, they just want to see new experiences. We've seen CSOs become cops and CSLs become cops. And we've seen, people move and expand into dispatch roles and things. And so I think that says something too about where we are.
So I think the question of retention is what I think you were thinking about, because I can understand why somebody would come here, and it's an active place compared to being in Shelburne, and I can totally see that they would get the experience. But then if some other opportunity came, would they leave? I mean, that's kind of I mean, that of course happens in every situation. So I wonder if you have thought of any retention programs or some way we can sort of, and this applies across the board. I think I'm even talking about officers, because you have in the past mentioned that, they have gone somewhere else. It's Colchester, South Burlington, nothing is happening, right? So let me finish. I just have one thought that just came, which is that I wonder if one of the retention it's a lot of work, because that's what came out of that award ceremony. It's interesting work. It is work, you're not, there's not one call that comes to you every 5 years. It's, things are happening. This is what sort of keeps you vibrant, so to speak, rather than just sitting in an office and just, looking at, internet while waiting for that call to come. So I don't know if I'm articulating it well, but is there a way to make that part of the retention narrative? Like, not only, okay, you're getting a good paycheck, it's, good, it's also a hard work, but it keeps you busy, it keeps you engaged, right?
Yeah.
You see where I'm going with that?
Yes, I think
There's nothing worse than being bored at your job. I think that's
Nobody at the Burlington Police Department right now is bored. Frustrated, tired, maybe. Satisfied, at times, I think proud, yes. But bored, no, it's not a word that we've got. And so to the extent that making that a component of both recruitment and retention is possible, I think you're right on the money, Commissioner. How? I don't know the answer to that entirely. We are thinking about some various things on recruitment and retention. I've been working with Carolyn Irwin, with Recruitment Officer Corporal Carolyn Irwin, with Recruitment Coordinator Anhad Bajwa. Both of them have come up with some very good ideas that we're at work on, including maintaining the bonuses that we currently give for incoming officers, creating some kind of incentive or bonus for existing officers to be recruiters themselves, right? The best folks to talk about this job are the folks who have it and who are willing to say, this is a good place to work, this is a city I like to serve, the job itself is satisfying and exciting and is rewarding on some level. And so how do we also encourage them to do that? Because they're not just going to do it out of the goodness of their heart. So, is it a day off here or there? Is it a bonus about a money bonus? Is it a brand new 350-foot yacht like the one that Mark Zuckerberg just bought? Probably not that one, but something that they could enjoy. And so we have thought about those kinds of things. We also have looked at some plans, for example, for a sabbatical program to give officers time off away, because as I say, I go back and forth. I don't want to make this sound like a job that you don't want because it's so exhausting, but it is a tiring job. It asks a lot of the people who are in it. It gives a lot as well. But if we could find ways to give more, to make certain that we're feeding them in a way that is, beneficial to their wellness, I think that's something that's incumbent on us to try. And a sabbatical program, which it would be pretty innovative, is such a thing.
One thing I was sort of just wondering about, and maybe that's not possible, but I know in the military, they give like allowances on top of your pay. So you might have like a basic allowance for quarters, which is an additional amount that's not taxed.
Right.
For income tax, it's just money given to you so that you can live off the land, and more is given to you in more expensive areas.
Right.
And I was wondering if it's possible to make some arrangement like that so that people can get, like, while the prices are so high, just an additional amount on top of their regular base pay to just provide for housing.
Yeah, I mean, I think something like that would be great. Some kind of incentive for housing, some kind of incentive for childcare, some kind of, you know, bonuses of that sort. The thing is, of course, we can't write tax code, and the Army can't either, but it has means to do so, and there are those who will do so on its behalf. I don't think anybody's knocking down doors to write tax code for BPD, but there are things we could look into, and we've looked at some, right? I attended a meeting about the possible use of a local church as a childcare location. We have talked a little bit about the idea of incentivizing housing. Part of the problem is how you do that, who pays for it, and then whether or not it's compensation and therefore has to be part of a bargaining question, whether the city is doing it, which really the city is going to tell you it cannot afford to do that right now, whether it is something that is channeled through a 501c3, but for example, the Queen City Police Foundation, which is such a 501c3, if it started funneling that much money, and the second you did rent for more than 4 or 5 people, it would be a lot of money. It changes the brackets, it has a lot of other requirements, it becomes a very, and the fact that I'm saying all this means we have talked about it and done a lot of looking into it. I would love to make it happen, and I don't want to say all these nays in order to be a naysayer and say it's not possible, but.
Commissioner
So-
Comerford, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I have several. My first question is, what do we pay CSLs and CAOs as starting pay? And then my second question is, in terms of recruitment, what are we planning and have we been able to do for refugee population, Hispanics, Blacks, et cetera, for our minority communities?
Well, the CSOs start at grade 15, which is a starting pay of $56,000. CSLs are grade 18, which is a starting pay of 67 and change, almost $68,000. And both of those are a little bit lower than the starting for police officers, but they're different kinds of jobs. What are we doing for recruitment? We've been quite successful recruiting new Americans into a number of roles. We have new Americans in the CSO and CSL ranks, new Americans in the police officer ranks, and you know, we're doing that through a variety of means. Local, to be honest, one of the most successful things we had for recruiting was our school resource officer, and we don't have that anymore. So that has been a big loss. But we have at least, I can think of at least 3 employees who came to us because of their relationships with both the school resource officer and with our junior milers program, all of whom are new Americans. So
the starting pay is right about what it is for master's level social workers, just FYI.
that is because the CSL is supposed to be a master's. You can get the job.
But
Sorry.
Yeah, I realize. I'm just trying to say that it's not more. It's probably average for MSW. So it's good. It's all good.
So the next is the priority response plan. And you know, we've talked about this each meeting. The next slide is a depiction of how it works. I've decided to sort of start including that in these, since although I know that it gets boring for all of you to see the same slide each time, there are many people who look at this for the very first time, you know, once it gets released. So next slide, please.
It's not really readable.
This one is not readable? Oh, that previous.
The previous one,
Yeah.
it's like, it's nonsense.
It is very small, but there are 130 categories. I'm not entirely, if you have an idea for how to present it differently that would make it a little more effective, I'd be all ears.
I think maybe just having, like, what I would do is just have like a couple of examples of like the high priority ones that you guys would respond to, and then a few examples of ones that you would expect us to report online.
Okay.
Something like that, because that's just not it's not readable in the time allotted, or.
Well, not in this meeting, but I mean, if you open it up yourself
Right.
as a
I'm saying,
PDF.
Just like for presentation purposes.
Yeah, no, I have zero intention for anybody who's getting this presentation online right now or watching it in the room to be able to do anything with that. This is entirely for somebody who actually goes to the document and looks it over him or herself or themselves after. A description of how the plan works. Next. Our incident volume, we're up 6% so far this year, and that is higher than any year since 2019. So 6%, rather, we're up 4% since 2019, 6% over last year. And we are stacking a number of calls, but we are actually referring many, many fewer calls to online reporting. We've actually cut that in half, so that's a positive. Next. Some of the selected incidents and where they're going. We are, we've seen decreases. Last year was pretty terrible for a lot of quality of life type issues, such as larcenies and overdoses. This year is slightly better. It's still not where we want it to be. We're at 100 this year for overdose. While that is a big change and a good change from 148 last year at this time, it is still way higher than any of the years that came before. And so we have work to do. Oh, sorry, go back. Yeah.
The domestic disturbance, that is inching up, which is interesting because it had been on the decline for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Or at least had stabilized. Am I getting that right? And it's going up. And is that domestic disturbance? Does that include domestic violence?
No, so domestic assault is a separate category, and that's actually down quite a bit.
Okay, yeah,
I would
that I
say that probably some of the increase that you're seeing there is the fact that domestic calls are not turning into assaults. Or at least they're not assaults for the officer when the officer arrives on scene. A domestic assault is there injury? Is there a person complaining of pain? Is there a victim who is willing to be a victim as well? Now, if we see all of the signs of injury and if it's clear that an assault has occurred, whether or not the person wants to cooperate, and unfortunately, in instances of domestic assault, oftentimes the victim won't cooperate initially, we're still going to call that a domestic assault. Just because the person won't cooperate or doesn't want to at that moment or isn't ready to at that moment is not a reason for us to say, well then, we're not going to do anything with this. We'll still call it a domestic assault if those factors are present and clear, and we'll refer it immediately to our domestic violence prevention officer and the domestic violence victims advocate, both of whom are going to be better positioned to try to work with folks who may be reluctant to go through what can be a challenging cold system for a really complicated and traumatic kind of crime. But I think that the diminishment of assault is a good thing overall, but I do think that we're probably seeing some of those numbers in the domestic disturbance uptick.
And what is your reaction to the gunfire incidents? Do you feel like this is a good number? Or
Yeah, I mean, knocking on wood, it's lower than it was in that really abysmal year of 2022, right? 2022 was abysmal. And this is right when it started going crazy in 2022. We had our first gunfire murder of the year in about a week and a half in 2022. And so thus far, we have not seen that. I've spoken before about the fact that I feel like this year is, I know that it's higher than it has been in some years, including last year's at this point. But I don't feel the same things in the air, as it were, that we felt definitely not in 2022, and definitely not even in 23 or 21. So, and the gunfire really hadn't taken off at this point in 2020, not really, even though there are 5 there. Next, I think it's it. Yeah, that's it. That is, and thank you very much. That was a relatively longish chief's report, so apologies.
Okay, any questions from any of the other commissioners? Or we can, Commissioner Comerford?
A very quick one. Why the massive increase in the traffic side?
Traffic, you mean?
Yes.
We have an officer, the bulk of those stops are being conducted by a single officer. He was responsible for, I think, 60% of all the stops last year, and is similarly responsible for a lot this year. He works a lot of, there's an overtime detail that's funded outside the department called SHARP, and that detail is a state level detail with federal money as well, I think, and that is something that officer does for overtime. And a lot of those stops are stemming from that. But we're also hearing a lot. I just today got a request for somebody complaining of driving behaviors down at the south end of town. Let me see, to get it right. Sorry.
South Prospect and Crescent.
Yeah, I was gonna try to pull it up, Wade, to actually show, to read the actual note, and what he was saying he needed, is essentially pleading for a vehicle, a cruiser, to be parked, which we cannot do. We don't have the ability to do that. The officer on overtime does it. We don't really determine where the locations are for SHARP, but if I can put a SHARP location at this particular intersection, maybe we'll try to do that. I want to see for myself whether or not there actually is indication of, have there been crashes at that location? Have there been tickets written or indications of bad driving at that location other than the email writer's plea? But traffic is very important to a lot of people, and I think they want us to do more stops. I am supportive of it as long as those stops are caused entirely by driving behavior, and we are working to make that the case.
Okay, thank you, Chief. 4.2, which is our continued discussion of DD40. Hopefully, we will at some point conclude our discussion on DD40.
Yeah.
Page 17, D4, page 17, if Commissioner Keefe can speak to the 14 days period that we had hoped he could weigh in on from last meeting. Commissioner Keefe, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I have not completed my review. I understood we would have a special session for a comprehensive discussion of DD40.
We can certainly do that. And that's where I am too, because at that meeting, I don't know, Chief, you'll be able to make it or not to the June 18th meeting at 6 p.m. I have a list of topics that sort of has come up in our regular discussion. Right, we will not have a regular meeting, but we'll have a special meeting around DD40 and the Police Commission complaint policy. And this includes Chief status update. I think that's one of the things that you have brought up, and Commissioner Oski. And also B2 on page 16 has to be changed in light of our policy on body-worn cameras. So these are some of the things. I can certainly write them down for you, but it has to wait until after our June 18th meeting. We are also expecting Anthony Irapino to weigh in on DD40 as well, and our concerns. Anything else? If anybody else, any other commissioners have any thoughts on that, or we'll hold our thoughts until June 18th? Hold our thoughts, okay. Item 5.1 and 5.2, use of force reports. I have reviewed them. Any discussions or requests for review? I have none, but anybody else has any? No? Does not look, okay. All right, so none, DC LeBrac, okay, go ahead, turn on.
There was some that Commissioner Keefe had requested several months ago that I was actually in agreement on, and
We haven't received those, but I think Commissioner Keefe, I think there's been some miscommunication. I thought Commissioner Keefe had said, just sort of forget about them, let's move on. But Commissioner Keefe, did I understand you wrong at that time. Would you still want us to pursue that? Because we haven't received those, and I can certainly pursue those.
Well, I think it's probably more relevant why we haven't received those. What is the status of the policy?
That's actually a good question. Is there a signed agreement between the police commission and the BPOA, or what's the status
Yes.
of that?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I haven't
But they
received
agreed
a
with
cop-
it,
I haven't
yes,
received
it's-
a copy of that.
This, we passed a policy and they agreed with it. We invited them, they came and talked to us. I met with them, and I haven't heard anything from their attorneys as to, we complied with everything they asked. So essentially, I think, if I am understanding, maybe Chief has a different opinion about that, but from the commission perspective, I was of the understanding that we have an agreement. And I've heard nothing about them saying, no, we are not in agreement. So I'm going on the assumption that if we haven't heard, we have passed the policy, it's the policy. And I have forwarded that policy to the city council.
I've yet to see an actual finished copy of that, your whole
Okay.
agreement on that night. I was present, but I've yet to see an actual copy of that, or the actual policy itself, I guess, the finished policy with all your agreements and their agreements.
Right, do you want me to send it to you? I mean, it is in the agenda. I believe it is attached to the last month's agenda. And I can certainly send you a copy. I did send a copy to, I believe it was Shannon. I did send a copy to BPD. So somebody in BPD has that copy. So
Okay, well then I'll
I
get it from
can,
them.
but no, I can email it to you. So that's very clear. I think the difference was that we had to give a reason, which was the DD, which, I'm blanking out on the reasoning. We had to give a reason.
Right.
So,
I think
and,
moving forward, the easiest way would be then maybe an email to me with
Okay.
the incident that you want and the reason, and then I
Okay.
can
Perfect.
assign those through evidence.com.
and I can certainly go back and send the ones we had from January back to you, because clearly, Commissioner Cox, you are interested in those that you had requested in January.
I think, and maybe you could help kind of sort this last piece of it out, because having the policy at all doesn't make a lot of sense unless there's some way of circling back around after we've watched the videos with the police department to say, if the purpose of us watching is to notice things that we might be able to talk about with you to help improve procedures and so forth, or to sort of get a better overall picture of how things are done in the police department, if it's something that we're just not understanding correctly. And in some cases, for example, with the mental health directive, there's been a number of ones that I've already seen where the provisions of the mental health directive are not followed. And so I think it's more of a matter of understanding or training or other things, and not so much where officers should be disciplined. So that would be
Well,
some.
I think you're putting the cart before the horse on that one. I think before you say, right, that the officers have done something wrong or haven't followed procedure, I think it would be a discussion and explanation of exactly how the directive works and how the officers followed it, and if they did or did not follow that directive properly.
Right, but in some cases, like, it's quite clear. So for example,
I have to disagree with you on that.
Okay.
I don't think it's quite clear, because we're all looking at this. We already had this discussion when we were talking about the policy. Everybody's looking at this from a hindsight of already knowing how the outcome was, and not from how the officer was perceiving it and dealing with the information they had available at that moment. So those types of things need to be looked at, and if that's, and that's certainly why the policy's there and why we can have these discussions, but
Okay,
don't think
but in a spirit of, I guess, trying to work together and to try to take a helicopter view rather than punishing officers, which is not the intent, for most of the viewing is not with the intent to punish officers, that there needs to be some way of having those discussions with the BPD. And
Right, and discussions and back and forth, and like you said, maybe gaining a different perspective of what,
Right. But it
Again,
may
like,
be,
I-
it may be from time to time that the police department gains a different perspective, because
I'm
I'm
not
just telling
saying-
you.
I'm not saying or trying to say that we're trying to cover anything up or do anything like that, but I think to jump ahead and just say like, well, they did this wrong and they are clearly not following the directive, like, I think that's disingenuous to the officers. I think, one of the reasons why we have this policy in place, which is good, and now we can all step back, look at these things and meet and speak about them.
Okay, so if we email you directly, can we have a meeting with
Sure.
you?
Well, you have to be careful.
Or what would be the proper?
But I think
What would be the
Commissioner,
procedure?
Commissioner Cox, I think the way I am seeing is that we make the request, and then we have a chance to review them, and then we look at, we could do it in a very, I would like it to be in a collaborative way, and I want to make that clear to both the chief and DC LeBrac, but it might be that we sometimes disagree with BPD's viewing of it. And at that point, I think we have to discuss it in executive session and move forward, make recommendations, whatever it is that we wish to do, right? But I think, okay.
I do not want to do it that way.
Okay.
I think that in my mind, how I had envisioned this was something like a little bit more casual, like where you could sit down and actually have a conversation. So either in terms of having like a working group, or in terms of having like a discussion, or let's sit down and have a cup of coffee, and I can tell you exactly what I've seen. And I'm referring to videos that I've seen for the last year, okay? And I was like kind of surprised by the first set of videos that I saw. There seemed to be some issues with respect to what the police did versus what the directive calls for. And it could be that I'm just not understanding. That's a possibility that I'm totally willing to admit, that I don't understand what I saw, okay? But I'm just telling you that in my mind's eye, what I saw did not appear to be actions consistent with the directive. And I can be very specific about it because I've thought about it for a long time, but I'd like to sit down and have like a non-defensive, collaborative conversation about what it is that's seen versus what.
I'm not trying to be defensive. This needs to be fair to everyone, the public, the officers involved, and jumping right out. You're certainly entitled to your opinion, what you saw, and we very may well need to look at it and try to see what the officer was thinking or what happened, and depending on how that looks, we're certainly open to, I'm not saying we're right or the officer's right. Like, I can't say anything until I would look at the directive and go back and look at that video as well.
Okay, so
And I don't have the time when I write these summaries and stuff like that to look at every single video and watch the videos, nor can I, because that would kind of randomly be auditing the officer's videos, which is a violation of the directive for me to do, the body-worn camera policy. But I'm certainly open to that. I'm just saying, like, to come out in a public forum and it just doesn't seem, without having looked at these, I can't answer your questions, or I can't even come up with a plausible answer to help try to clarify what you saw was different, or what you feel is not following the directive. That's all. That's what I'm trying to say.
But can I interject in this conversation and say that it seems like the commission itself is somewhat divided on what is the purpose of watching these body-worn camera at this time. Like, what, we can ask, but then when we see a directive, somebody follows directive, everything looks good, but if one of us notices, or several of us notice, there is a violation or there are some problematics, I feel like we ourselves need a discussion of how we wish to proceed on that. I don't think the policy is very clear on As far as our internal issues are concerned. You see what I'm saying, Commissioner Cox? I know what you're, I'm agreeing with you, but I'm also
So
disagreeing.
I don't view it as an internal police commission issue. I view it as an issue that should be able to be collaborated on between the police department and the police commission. I understood that's what the purpose of our policy was. So I don't think it's something that we can just discuss amongst ourselves and say, we all say, yeah, well, that doesn't seem right because it seems like it's not
Right.
consistent with the directive, but it's not for the purpose of pinging a particular officer. It's for the purpose of saying, hey, what we saw is this. It does not appear to be consistent with the directive. Can you talk to us about this?
And are there moments of improvement, right? What can we suggest? And I think that is in one of the policies that we can suggest, changes, training, whatever it is. Commissioner Comerford.
That's been our procedure for, at least the first 2 years of my time on the commission, that we actually do that. We all look, anybody has a concern, we talk about it, and then we as a team, and then we ask for some, DC Lebrecht to come talk to us about it. And then that's when the collaboration actually happens after we've talked about it ourselves a little bit. At least that's my history of it.
Right. And that seems, I think that is what you are saying, Commissioner Cox, right? That there is some collaboration and some.
Yeah, and I don't think it necessarily has to be like with a quorum. I would think that it could be just, one or two people talking to one or two people.
Commissioner Garrison.
Yeah, Susan, you pretty much said what I was going to say, but in the past on the commission, we've always taken these issues into the executive order and talked about them in a group forum fashion. And then we would include council if we needed to, but to make sure that, the directives are there and we all understand it and whatnot. So that's been the process since I've been on the commission. So
I can explain. He's agreeing with Commissioner Comerford.
Just one other point to Commissioner Cox. Oftentimes I think it's helpful to look at it as a group because we learn through that process. And if it's individual conversations, the conversation's been had, between whoever and DC Lebrecht, and the rest of us are not engaged in that learning process. And there's lots to learn in this whole situation. So
Okay, so
that
is
would
there,
be a benefit.
is there some way of looking at it as a group without having a quorum so that we have to have an open meeting about it?
We've never
Because there's
done
some things I would like to just be able to discuss in terms of like a working group scenario.
I suppose you can have a conversation with other
Yeah.
commissioners.
I think we can have conversations, right? We can have individual
order for us to-
conversations. I think the question is, if I was understanding DC Lebrecht, it was, what do we do with that information, right? I mean, do we ask him to sort of, okay, these are some of the concerns that we may have had, and then, he sort of says, well, you didn't really understand what was going on, or the chief, whoever has time, or, explain it, or we suggest some training, or we suggest, listen, we were not satisfied, we don't believe. I agree with you, it might be subjective, but on the other hand, that's our role. DC Lebrecht, that's why we are here as a citizens body, to provide that kind of
And I'm not
mirror.
disputing that.
Right,
And then
so-
maybe the policy or the directive itself needs to be looked at and revised as well, because
Right.
it's not capturing everything that, times change and some of these directives were written some time ago and they need to be updated perhaps to make them more current.
Right, and we're doing that, right, slowly with all the DDs as well. So, okay, so I think, are there any requests for this month? I don't have any, it doesn't seem like anyone has any. And we will send you the list from January, and we'll move from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6, commissioner comments. Does any of the commissioners have any comments?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Garrison. I have a comment, but go ahead.
Okay. Where are we at with the,
Can you speak up a little bit near the microphone?
I'm sorry. Where are we at with with our council and that agreement or contract with the city and the council, with the commission?
We don't know. We haven't heard anything. As far as I know, Anthony is still the commission attorney. His contract runs out on June 30th, I believe. I haven't heard if it's been renewed or not. I'm hopeful that it will be renewed. He is going to be participating in our June 18th meeting. So hopefully by that time, he would have a response to Commissioner. So that's where we are right now. Okay. I also haven't heard anything about getting a support staff yet. Again, but I remain hopeful that we'll get somebody. Right. I thank you, Chief. I do want to talk a little bit about the award ceremony. Excellent award ceremony, and I was honored to give Shannon the award for her continuing work at BPD. Shannon actually thanked both of us, but I have to say the actual text of the speech was written by you. I just read it. It was an excellent speech. I just didn't give it. So I just want to acknowledge the fact, and this is for Shannon to know, but it was really an excellent ceremony. I also wanted to let the commission know that with the support of Chief Murad and Commissioner Cox, I nominated 2 BPD detectives to the Attorney General's Award for Community Policing for 2023. I did receive an email from AG's award committee that our nomination has been submitted. Every year they receive more than 250 nominations, so it's a very highly competitive field, but I would like to continue to look for other opportunities nationally and statewide to highlight the work of our local officers. At the award ceremony, I must thank, since he's here, DC LeBrac, his speech, in which I was very moved by his speech at one point when he said, I don't exactly know which officer he was giving the award to. I don't remember his name. Could it be Huynh? He was Huynh, and
Lieutenant Huynh.
Huynh. So my bad, so I should have known his name, but Huynh, who was actually hurt in an encounter, and DC LeBrac at one point said, as a senior supervisor, he's a better person than I am in terms of work. I've never heard a supervisor say that. so I don't know who should be given the award, DC LeBrac or Huynh, but it was very moving, and I'm glad I was able to participate. The last, pretty much, item 7, officer commendations. I have 2. One is really long, so I truncated that here. During the week of April 29th to May 3rd, I was assigned to the Vermont Police Academy to assist with instruction of a level 2 use of force and tactics class. During the same time, your agency allowed Officer Patrick Hartnett and Officer Huynh, I hope I'm saying his name right. Did I say that right? Huynh. To participate in training with the 117th basic class as training assistant. My class was understaffed with certified instructors and having no more than 4 and sometimes only 2 for a group of 25 students. Officer Hartnett, also a VCJC use of force NT instructor, readily stepped in to help several times in between his duties as a TA. His assistance and knowledge of the subject was greatly appreciated by the students and the other instructors. Both Patrick and Huynh are exemplary in their personal commitment to the training of police officers in the state of Vermont, as well as demonstrating the Burlington Police Department's commitment to training safe and competent police officers. The second commendation, I wanted to let you know how impressed I was with Officer Parrott's interaction with both X and Y tonight. He was able to de-escalate both parties while maintaining his composure and help them come up with a temporary solution for the evening. He was respectful of both of them and listened to what they both had to say. He also helped X refocus and take care of herself to help her de-escalate. So those are the 2 commendations. As far as these commendations are concerned, Chief, do you think, I'm really interested to hear about the de-escalation tactics, because some of the commendations are about that. And I kind of wonder if it would be a good thing for us to hear what BPD is doing that is so successful from a public perspective. This is kind of selfish because I feel like I could learn something that I could employ on King Street. No, seriously, I think it is something, right? This is not the first time. I believe in the last 5 months we have received 3 or 4 commendations as far as de-escalation is concerned. So I wonder if one of those officers that get commendation can appear in front of us and give us kind of like, just one slide of what is the de-escalation points you use or they use that leads to what we hear in these commendations. Is that possible?
Yeah, no, I think we could arrange for something like that as sort of an introduction to some of the tools that we use. There are several. As I said before in the intro, before the chief's report, we do something that was created by the Police Executive Research Forum, or PERF. We helped create it back in 2016, 2017. It is called ICAT, Integrated Communications and Tactics. It is a system that is all about de-escalation and about controlling situations that don't involve firearms without having to use firearms. So people who are barricaded, people who have maybe a cutting edge weapon or a blunt instrument, and who are in crisis, and that is a mindset and a training model that is something everybody goes through. We have a number of train the trainer, that is training certified officers. We also have a number of officers who go through crisis negotiation, which used to be called hostage negotiation, or HNT, and is now crisis negotiation. Lots of emphasis on active listening, lots of emphasis on repetition back to the individual, lots of emphasis on creating a degree of simpatico with the person with whom you're engaging, so that person knows you are hearing what they have to say. And then last but not least, of the sort of common methods, we've sent a number of officers to Team 2 training. That is a state level training on dealing with folks who are in mental health crisis, but not just that. People who also, it's also effective for people who are under the influence of substances, or people who are just having a bad day and aren't necessarily listening as well as they normally might. And so all of those are tools, but really it just comes down to the fact that, these officers don't want to get in fights with people, and if you can convince someone that they are doing what is best for them and what they, it's in their best interest to do it this way or that way, you're always better off than trying to force them to believe that something is in their best interest. It's in your best interest to come with me to the hospital. It is in your best interest to recognize that someone has accused you of something, or we caught you doing something, and you're going to have some degree of answer for that. And the easier we all go, the better. And if you can just, allow yourself to be taken into custody, it's better for you, it's better for us. That's always what an officer strives to do. And the fact is, our officers see it and have to do it far, far, far more often than any other officers in the state.
I'm really looking for a de-escalation for dummies kind of. No, seriously, I just want to. I know you have a language, you can sort of speak to that fluently, but I think for the public, right?
Yeah.
It's not only what you are doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that's a matter, but what can the public do
Sure.
in certain situations before even the police arrives? Because I'm telling you, I've been in some of those
Yeah.
situations. That's why I'm saying
And
I've
there are-
been in contact with one of the people that is quite frequently arrested
Yeah, I
in
think-
Burlington, and he was a neighbor, and I wish I knew. I had some of the words.
Sure.
Right? So I'm not necessarily looking for this extensive, kind of 20-page analysis. What I'm really looking for, not that I don't appreciate that, I of course appreciate that, but for the public perspective, a layperson's perspective, what is it that police would suggest we do when the police hasn't arrived, is not available, and we find ourselves in harm's way? And exactly, go ahead, finish, say that.
So they they've really worked hard on training up people to be trainers in mental health first aid, which is an 8-hour training. And we had discussed it earlier this year, late last year, as a stopgap measure because the CIT training that was recommended in your spreadsheet of
The CNA recommendations.
CNA recommendations is 40 hours of training, but the mental health first aid training is just 8 hours.
Yeah.
And they're doing a lot of it right around this region right now and next month. And so it would be something maybe to consider. I did have another question though, which is, because I was thinking about back in the olden days, I did shore patrol up in Alaska. And our main purpose was to get all of the drunken people back from the bars, back to whichever ship they're from or base they were from, mostly military folks. But I weighed maybe like 110 at the time and was very young, but I was one of the best people at this, at doing shore patrol and getting people calmed down. And sometimes they'd be trying to hit me over my head, but I just stood my ground. I would just, I would just insert myself in between people and just start talking low and nice and sweet and talk to them and figure out who their friends were. And then, here your friend Joe's going to walk you back to the ship. And they, okay. And then they sort of go along with the whole thing. And I was wondering, in today's policing, do you find that women do a better job at de-escalating just by their nature, I guess, is what I was really curious about. Because I did notice that the Marine Corps Shore Patrol, like I just had a billy club. I did not have any, I was qualified on a bunch of different weapons, but we did not carry a weapon for Shore Patrol, only a billy club, and I never drew my billy club for doing Shore Patrol work. But the Marine Corps guys who were doing shore patrol, they had these very tall, I call them staffs. They were like giant billy clubs. And they would like walk into the same scenario that I would walk into with just using my words. They would walk into it swinging the staff and throwing people up against the wall. And I'm going, that's the opposite of de-escalation. I think it's the opposite of what they should have been doing. And so I didn't know if it was just like that they were trying to show who's boss or what the dynamic was exactly with what was going on in their heads about why they thought this was useful, but I certainly didn't think it was useful.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, do you find that women are useful in de-escalating? It's like, I guess.
Can you speak to gender differences or maybe?
I mean, I think we have a lot of officers of both sexes who are talented at it, and I think there are, we have a couple. One officer who was acknowledged at the award ceremony was acknowledged not only for some work that she's done with regard to tracking stolen vehicles, but also her tremendous contributions to the crisis negotiation unit. So.
Okay, anyone else has any thoughts on this, or we can move on to commission business? We really have one, which is I would like you to speak to the full stop at North End Park and North Champlain, why you made that decision.
Sure. We have had historically, as an agency, a number of crashes at that location involving cruisers. There have been crashes at that location, plenty involving drivers who aren't in the police department as well. But we've had a number of police cruisers crash, including 2 recently. I put out a memo in March requiring that there be a stop even when you are operating by what we call code driving with lights and sirens, and there are various codes that correspond with a level of call to which you are responding. But irrespective of whether you're going lights and sirens, you certainly, as a police officer in a marked police vehicle that is operating with lights and sirens and responding to an emergency, you have a legal exemption from many different traffic laws. However, you are not exempt from operating with what is called due regard. That is due care for other drivers on the road and being safe for you and for others. And I just believe that based on the history of those 2 intersections, there is no situation in which due regard does not involve a a stop to clear the space and make certain that everybody sees you and hears you. Those are our two narrowest, tightest intersections. Something about the structure of the buildings that are on them, the bakery I think is closing now, but that bakery is close to the street. It obstructs people's views. The north is, as it is, narrow and barely a two-vehicle street. And so there is nothing to which you are responding that is going to be detrimentally affected by coming to a complete stop at that moment, making certain it's clear, and then moving on. And you cannot help a situation that you never arrive at.
Okay, and you want everybody to come to a complete stop, right?
That's correct. I ordered.
No exception. I think that's the.
Well, what I changed is, that's correct. The March understanding was that if you had the green,
Right.
why would you come to a stop? Having experienced another cruiser incident at that location, I just am now saying it doesn't matter whether you have the green or not. And it's almost, there's a certain amount that's, that's kind of silly almost. Not only do you have the green, in which any driver would proceed through, not only are you using lights and sirens, which mean that the green should be irrelevant to you, as should the red, although you have to use due regard, but I am saying I believe that intersection has been historically of a significant and sufficient danger that we owe it to come to a complete stop. That was the nature of that.
Yeah, my only concern was that I actually went there and I kind of looked at both the intersections in my morning walk. And one of the things I am a little concerned about is that as it is, people get kind of nervous when they see when they see a police vehicle. So there's already that psychological impact. I wonder if the officer stopping at a green light might confuse the drivers more. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just being a little bit paranoid because people are going rather fast there. My concern is actually not with BPD.
Yeah.
My concern is actually about the other drivers, in a way, essentially being confused as to what's happening. Either they are too close to the BPD vehicle. It'd be great if they keep two cars farther down, but they're not always. Sometimes they're very close to the vehicle. So I wonder, this is just a thought that I had, just standing there and watching how quickly the traffic was moving is, just give it a thought that if it's green, I wonder if, it may be that nothing happens, that your policy is very successful, that nothing happens. I wonder if that creates a kind of confusion among the drivers, because they're already kind of worried, right? That it's a police car in front of me with lights going on. So just when I saw it and then I went and scoped out the area, I just had that question and thought.
Sure.
That's something to think about, though you've explained the policy clearly well, and I generally support it. Of course, you would know better. Okay. Also, we already mentioned the next regular schedule for meeting for June is canceled, and we have a special meeting. We invite the chief, and we will also invite a BPOA representative to weigh in on the matter if they so wish. Right? I hope everyone's agreeable to that. They can attend the meeting. 9.1, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
All right, is there a second? I see Commissioner Comerford. Hearing none, any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor say aye. Aye, we are adjourned. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.